Appreciate it. Isn't it wonderful what we can do with technology here? And I'm very excited to have this Joy Stream with you today, so I'd like to welcome you. My name is Chris Coursey, and I'm the Director for Thrive Training. And Thrive is where we strategically train bonded pairs in the skills to thrive, and that'll make a little more sense as we go along through these Joy Streams. I also have the privilege of serving under Shepherd's House as the Assistant Director, and I'm quite passionate about the life model, and I've used the life model pastoring and training and really working with churches to help churches be fully alive. And so one of my hopes for all of you is that as you're learning this material, it's going to bless your ministry, and it's going to enrich your marriage. It's going to increase the joy in your family and your children. The good thing about joy, which is what we're going to look at today, is joy is a learned skill that we can use anytime, any place, and frankly, I find that exciting. So share joy is what we call skill one. And if you're able to see this picture between this grandfather and his granddaughter, there's some shared joy going on here. Their faces convey joy. And if we could hear the giggles and the laughter and the conversation, we would hear that joy in their voice as well. And their body language would convey, I'm really glad to be with you today. And so that's a skill we want to use, and we want to use this in our own life. And as we're going to look at today with Dr. Jim Wilder, we're going to look at how to start joy with your staff and your leadership team. So basically, joy starts here with you. Joy is not something you have to wait. You don't have to put on hold. Joy is something you can convey. The moment you pick up the phone, the moment you walk out of your office, you can convey that I'm authentically glad to be with you. And I'm here to tell you, conveying joy, growing joy levels are only going to make an atmosphere that much better. And so this is not something we have to wait on. And what you'll find with joy is it spreads. Joy is contagious. And so the moment you spark some joy with your team, you'll notice a change in the mood, a change in the atmosphere. People will find the safety to express that they're glad to be together. And as we know from real life, there are moments where things happen where we're upset, we're overwhelmed, we're not always glad to be together. And so the goal is to return to joy and keep those joy levels high, because what will happen is upset also, distress will also spread. And when we don't know how to manage what we feel and get back to joy, then fear starts to spread, or anxiety, or overwhelm, and hopeless despair. And quite frankly, we're just not at our best when we're stuck in a negative emotion. And so let's share the good stuff. And this is something that you can start today. And it's free. So this is a pretty exciting thing. It's relational. And joy gives us strength. That might sound a little familiar from what we know about Jesus, and keeping his joy levels strong, and being motivated by joy even when he was having to go through the cross and all of what that represented. So as human beings, we're wired for joy, which means joy gives us strength, and joy actually helps our character. I know when I was spending a lot of time pastoring and ministering to other people, I frequently encountered lots of upset, lots of overwhelm, and didn't always know quite what to do. And as a leader, I felt responsible to fix and responsible to do something about it. And what I discovered as I started to work on proactively growing my joy is I noticed changes to my character and how I was able to express the best of myself under not only good conditions, but under some of the hard conditions where I might be feeling misunderstood or tired or accused, all those things that come with our job, so to speak, and that happen in life. And joy also helps us to achieve our mission and reach our goals. Joy is one of those things that, again, it's what we crave, it's what we need, and when we're glad to be together, that gives us strength to be able to be effective and be able to reach those goals that are on our plates. And it also means that joy softens some of the sting of hardship. like I said, as pastors, you are the example, whether we like that or not. We're the example as pastors for how do we navigate these storms. People look to us, and it's not just the good information that we know during hardship. It's actually how we respond and how people will feel seen and validated and understood, and are we able to stay glad to be together even under some tough conditions. And so we find that joy just really takes the sting out of some hardship, and it makes things a little more bearable, or actually a lot more bearable. And so those relational joy is really a helpful anchor when our ship's at sea and the winds are blowing. And we'll also, when we encounter conflict, one of the things that frequently happens during conflict is there's a quick drop in joy levels. People are no longer glad to be together. They're upset. They're distressed, and people tend to resolve conflicts according to whatever it is that they've learned growing up. And that's not always those aren't always the best tools. And so the beautiful thing about joy is it actually gives us strength to resolve conflicts, and the focus is actually being glad to be together again, even if we're not on the same page. Excuse me. So joy is a helpful skill to have during those hard times. And it's not if hard times happen, as you all know. It's when hard times happen. As Peter would tell us, not to be surprised when fiery trials show up on the doorstep. And so it's good to have that fire extinguisher of joy close by when that happens. And another great thing about joy is it sustains us. Joy gives us endurance. And so we're, as you could say, we're in it to win it when joy is with us here. It helps us to be able to endure. And I know personally when my joy levels were dropping when I was pastoring, I frequently questioned whether I should stay in ministry. And I tried to remember why I was even in ministry in the first place. And thankfully, being able to experience some people joy and some Emmanuel joy, I often found gave me refreshing endurance to get through those hard times. And then we are able to leave a legacy. And the legacy is not just something that's left because of our teaching, and it's part of it, but part of what your legacy is also the relationships that you've nurtured and those relationships that have blossomed in your life and through your ministry. Those are the things that really change lives, as people feel like they've been able to share some of our life together, and we're glad to be together. And we would also call this relational leadership. And so joy gives us a lot of strength to be the kind of leader who's relational. And I work with many a church leaders who, when their joy levels have dropped, one of the signs of that low joy is they're no longer nurturing those relationships. And now they have a congregation that's feeling bitter because they're not feeling seen by the pastor. They're not feeling, taken care of. They're not feeling important by the pastor anymore. And then there gets a lot of disgruntled people from that. So really, when we start thinking about sustaining our ministry and what kind of legacy are we going to leave, joy is a fundamental piece to that conversation and that equation. And joy is much better than good intentions and simply trying harder. I imagine some of you can relate to this, but I know for myself I enjoy being able to mark off things on my to-do list, and it's very easy to kind of be motivated by just getting my to-do list done. And what happens is there's no joy growth in that whole process. And I notice when I'm meeting with people and growing joy and still completing some of my tasks in the process, I find it very rewarding. And so joy just helps us be able to navigate our lives and our ministries much better than just having good intentions and trying to use some willpower. And so as we start thinking about this a little more personally, one of the questions we can ask is, how much of my day do I operate from joy and peace? When I think about my day, all right, I'm thinking about the first 4 or 5 hours that I've been working this morning. How much of that time have I been operating from joy and peace? Or am I feeling anxious most of the time, or tense? Maybe I feel overwhelmed much of the time, or restless. And so as I start thinking about myself, okay, how much am I operating out of joy? What about my staff, right? When I interact with my staff, what do I see in them? Do they seem to be, doing well and growing their joy, or they seem quite overwhelmed and tense and anxious, and let's think about that. And as we're going to discover today, there's actually some things we can do to make some changes if we would like to increase our joy output, so to speak. So what seems to be our dominant base of operations? All right. Do I feel just overwhelmed when I'm driving into work and I'm thinking about the 105 things on my to-do list and kind of letting that be my motivation? Right? What about my staff? And the exciting thing is that as long as we recognize there's some room for improvement, we can be that instrument of change, because basically joy does start with us. And so we're going to explore this a little bit, and I'd like to take a moment and welcome Dr. Jim Wilder, who is going to share with us a little bit about starting joy with our staff and our leadership team today. And Dr. Jim Wilder is a Shepherd's House Director. So Jim, I'd like to welcome you here with us today.
Hi, Chris. It's good to be with you today and to be a part of this whole joy stream. It sort of grew out of the brown bag lunches we used to have with pastors over the years when Shepherd's House was a regional counseling center, and every month we would get together with a group of pastors and we would talk over what we were learning and what they were learning and how these things went together. And now we get a chance to do all of that virtually. So I'm glad to be here with you, Chris, and also with all of you pastors that have joined us today for the discussion. I'm looking forward to how that's going to be. Chris, as we've been working on this new book about starting joy. Yes. And we've come up with 3 conditions that seem to be very, very necessary for getting joy started. And they're odd ones, really, when you think about it. The first is that you have to have weak and strong people together. Joy doesn't particularly get started when you have just weak people together or when you have just strong people together, at least not in a way that spreads. And what we're really interested in here is the kind of joy that spreads around to our community. So also, as we're having discussions with different churches that are looking at this material, one of the first questions they have in their mind is, well, who are the weak and who are the strong? And yesterday, as you know, Chris, I was getting a cold, so I took some kind of antihistamine. I don't know what it was, that little pill, but it put me so into a fog that I couldn't think 2 sentences in a row, which had actually put me among the weak yesterday. But today, I didn't take that same medicine. I learned from my experience, and so I'm much stronger than I was yesterday. So really, the weak and the strong are not like categories that are set in stone, but we all have not only weak and strong moments, but we have weak and strong areas in our lives. And the problem is that typically in church, we hide those, and no one is more encouraged to hide them than pastors. Why, if you let anybody know what your weaknesses are as a pastor, it's sort of an invitation for all-out military assault on you, is basically what I've watched over the years. Nobody appreciates that. Nobody enjoys it. Nobody is glad to hear that you've got weaknesses. And I think that's simply because all of our cultures, all the cultures that I'm familiar with, have a very negative view about what weakness involves. Which brings us to the second point about starting joy and transformation, and that is that not only is it important to have the weak and the strong together, but it's very important to have a tender response to weakness. So if you're going to be talking to people, interacting with people, so it's important if they show a weakness that rather than jump on them and say, well, you're the pastor or you're the deacon or you're the Sunday school teacher, how can you have that weakness? That our first response would be one of tenderness, of care about it. And I think that really demonstrates or summarizes rather the attitude that God has towards all of us and our weakness. He's rather familiar that we have them, and his response is to be very tender towards our weakness as soon as we admit them. when we're not admitting them, God can get quite firm trying to get us to admit the weakness. But as soon as we admit it, that fight is over, and it's on to the tender response that God has for those who will admit. So it made me think again now in terms of how do we start joy with our staff, that when you and I were doing the Thrive training together, Chris, we would start couples trying to teach them some joy. And it seemed that the most common reason why they couldn't experience much joy or get it started is they were just flat too tired.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Ed Corey and I go around teaching in lots of different schools around the world, and we've discovered that how tired the students are will determine whether or not we can get any joy started in the class. All the other factors don't seem to have nearly as much effect on that. And there's nothing like having a ministry or even being the only person on your staff. I mean, you've got way too much work to do for the amount of time allotted. So being fatigued and tired is a real joy killer. So it keeps us from having that tender response to weakness, because our weakness is getting in the way of getting our work done. So for me yesterday, my weakness was getting in the way of getting my work done, which was supposed to be writing. And it reminded me of this verse, or a couple of verses from Ezekiel, that where God is talking to the shepherds of Israel, basically our equivalent of pastors right there. But in Ezekiel chapter 34, verse 4, he's actually addressing what they are doing wrong. And he says, you have not encouraged the weary, tended the sick, bandaged the hurt, recovered the straggler, or searched for the lost. So there we have this, what he's looking for from them is basically a tender response to weakness, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Encouraging the weary, tending the sick, bandage the hurt, recovering the straggler. Those are all addressing weakness with tenderness. And then the interesting comment to me, and even the strong you have driven with ruthless severity. So again, this comes back to what I see as the description of many a pastor's life, that he is supposed, or she is supposed to be the strong person in the church, and the church and the demands of the whole ministry tend to drive the pastor with a sense of ruthless severity. You just have to get all of these things done one way or another. And I guess the way I would put it, Chris, is that it's going to be up to us to teach people that that isn't the biblical way.
Right.
Especially when it goes completely against the grain of our culture. So here within Shepherd's House, we've tried to put some of that into our overall way of operations. Like recently, you had your second child.
Yes.
And on the month that child turned 9 months old, and that's the big joy-building month, we rearranged all of the work schedules so that your wife, who's also an assistant director with us, would have time without many demands, that she could just spend building joy with the child, because it seemed important to us that we should, not drive her with ruthless severity. I just really don't want to get on the wrong side of that verse right there in Ezekiel. And then we compare it with what God tells us in verse 16 from his point of view, how he's going to do things. I will search for the lost, recover the straggler, bandage the hurt, strengthen the sick, and leave the healthy and strong to play. Now there's something just inspirational about that last part, and it seems as inspirational as it is rare. When was the last time that you as a pastor felt that you and the healthy and strong were going to have time to play? And that seems to me, if this is the way God does it, then this is what he's also expecting from us as shepherds, that we should have a priority on correcting the problems of the culture not just searching for the lost, recovering the straggler, bandaging the hurt, and strengthening the sick, but leaving the healthy and strong to play. That's particularly important when we think about our own staff and families and the people around us. So when we're thinking about starting joy, we want to have a tender response to weakness. We want to have the weak and the strong together so that when one of us is weak, another one can be strong and back and forth. We can share the load that way. But not just so that we can get all the work done. This is actually so that we will have a chance to be healthy and strong and play rather than to be driven ruthlessly. So it's complete, to me, a shift in how we tend to look at work. And that's important for me because if I had a tendency towards any kind of addictive pattern, it would certainly be to find work more rewarding than relationships. In fact, if I'm not feeling very satisfied with my relationships, there's nothing like going in and working on a project to make me feel like, well, at least I got something accomplished during the day. And so with that in mind, I find it personally very easy to drift away from this pattern that God is trying to get us to establish, not only for the church, but for the culture around us. And sort of basically to conclude on that, Chris, I would have to say that if we as leaders can begin to practice this kind of lifestyle where we look to increase the joy and the sense of rest in the people around us, we're not very likely to spread it to our congregations as well. So we sort of have to fight this this battle first, sort of set an example to the flock on how we're going to do that. So as I'm thinking about the practical issues, then in any church, the first question just comes with, can we honestly ask the question, how tired are we around here, and how much do we feel like we're driven with ruthless severity, even by our own conscience. I don't have other people driving me with ruthless severity. I certainly have endless demands on me, but if anyone's going to be ruthlessly severe with me, it's probably going to be me and not somebody else. So I have to look at that within my own life and just say, you know, am I taking time to really enjoy and build appreciation with God and others, which brings us down to the very practical thing that we can do. And that is, I think any church that I've ever met could, with just a little concentration, triple the amount of appreciation that they're experiencing and sharing by just making a point to share appreciation moments, like telling other people what we appreciate about them, from little things like the fact, Chris, that you prepared all of these PowerPoints so I didn't have to, which I appreciate. You know, to the fact that you've gone out and developed this way to integrate pastors with each other and with us so that we can be sharing what we're learning. That's a big gift, everybody. I ought to just appreciate that in your work.
Thank you.
And so there's simple things like that, and then by just knowing what other people appreciate, we can also do little things to make their eyes light up when we're just encountering them in you know, in the work environment. From simple things like remembering what's going on in their life to bringing them their favorite coffee from time to time.
Yes.
So, as basic as it seems, we all know that we're supposed to be grateful as Christians, and appreciation is a very close neighbor to that. It's expressing that gratefulness in a way that other people can share with us. So that would be my discussion starter for pastors.
Great.
I guess I'd leave you with one sort of serious thought, and that is, now with 30 years of experience of watching pastors and leaders crash and burn,
Mm.
It's the ones who get their joy levels low and are not paying attention to it that seem to be the ones that become the casualties, because it's something we just don't pay much attention to, and over the years it's become, to me, the most important thing to keep my finger on. It'd be like a pilot not keeping track of how much fuel he had on board. If you stop monitoring that, you're going to start crashing around the place. And the fuel that our mind runs on is joy. That's what keeps our relationship with God strong and what makes us stay closely connected to our spouse. All the good stuff runs on joy. So let's build it in each other and not let it run low.
Yes. Yes. Well, thank you. I appreciate those words. That's that really gives us a lot to think about as we start to reflect how our own joy levels are doing, and really want to share some of this wealth with the people that we love, the people that we serve. And it's one of the exciting things that I enjoy about the Thrive training, Jim, is when I'm able to lead a group of people and really focusing on growing their joy levels. It's quite enjoyable to see how those changes start to happen when a pastor and his or her spouse will start actively growing some joy together. You can literally see those transformations start to occur with each block of the Thrive training. And by the end of the week, it's well, let's just say there's a lot of excitement going on there. And so I'd like to highlight something that Jim mentioned here about keeping those joy levels high and strong. And that's being able to have a tender response to our weakness. And as Jim mentioned here, as a lot of the time as pastors, we don't feel that we're allowed or even have the permission or the right to share weaknesses because of the responses. And the responses aren't always tender responses. We often feel obligated to have to be strong and have to be together, so to speak. And what tends to happen is that we run low on fuel, and we're not realizing how low we are on fuel. And that's a really good analogy for this situation. And so what I found personally meaningful is setting that tone with the people that I love and the people that I serve, and keeping in mind, I'm not going to sit around and just wait for joy to drop out of heaven, but I actually, every interaction that I have with people, I have a chance to set the tone. And that was very real recently on a trip to Canada when I had to go through customs. Noticed frequently there's a very low amount of joy when you interact with people at customs. And I noticed one particular agent was actually quite joyful, and I was sure to convey joy, and I was glad to be there with him and interacting, and I just noticed a much different exchange on that particular occasion. And so what you'll find with your staff, what you'll find with your congregation, what you'll find with yourself and your family, there's no shortage of opportunities to practice joy. And it doesn't mean that we have to paint a smile on our face all the time. That would actually be very exhausting, and it wouldn't be genuine. But it means that we're just authentically glad to be together. And when we're weeping together, we're able to work back on having some joy in the middle of those hardships. And so we set the tone. And so one of the things I want everyone to reflect on a little bit today is what is on your face when you see and interact with your staff. All right? What are you wearing on your face? Because frankly, if you are tense, guess what? You're going to pass on that tension to your staff. If you're overwhelmed, you're going to pass that on. And it's not just not a good atmosphere for us. And so what I found very helpful is trying to remember some of my own personal joy before I start interacting with other people, particularly when I'm feeling fatigued, when I'm feeling overwhelmed. I can take 60 seconds and remember a joyful time, and I find that that really helps to shift the gears for my nervous system. So when I start interacting with other people, there's actually some joy, some authentic, genuine joy going on there. And then I also like to pay attention to my voice and my presence. What is it that I'm conveying? And again, this is one of the reasons we call joy a learned skill, because some of this might not feel natural. And so when we're first starting to practice this skill, it feels a little foreign. But what we find is we like the outcome. And when we like the outcome and the reward is an increase in joy, we're likely to do that repeatedly. And so practice this for yourself, and then you can see and feel the difference. And so that just remembering joy really helps us to start sharing joy around us. Let's face it, in ministry there's no shortage of things and reasons why we can be low joy. But it's more of a reason to proactively start experiencing joy ourselves, remembering joy, and starting to share joy. And as Jim mentioned today, one of the easiest ways here to start this process is just share what you appreciate about other people, what qualities that you appreciate. And I find this is not something I want to just take for granted and assume that people should just know what I appreciate about them. I make it a point that they hear what I appreciate about them, and I let my face light up when I'm sharing that. And but we also want to respect our need for rest and our need to return to what we'd call shalom, where everything is just where it needs to be for us as well as with God. And so we do want to respect our need for rest. And some practical ways that I found this helpful is if I'm in a staff meeting and I notice that people are looking like they're getting restless or overwhelmed, let's take 2 minutes and just catch our breath. Let's rest for a moment and then go on from there. Just these little moments of rest will actually go a long way. And I never recommend pushing through just for the sake of trying to force something. Again, whenever we try to force something or just push through even though we're tired, let's just push through and talk about the finances. Let's push through and have this discussion and deal with this conflict. We're not happy with the outcome when we're pushing through our needs for rest. And amazing how that works. So I thought this would be a good time for a little bit of interaction between us here, and I just want to put out some questions for us to discuss. And one of the first questions I want to look at is just what are some of the common needs that require tender responses among your staff? Let's move into some application here. So I'd like to open up the forum here.
So that means if you have a headset or a microphone or you're able to call in on the telephone, go ahead and raise your hand and I'll unmute you so that you can speak.
Yeah. So as we think about this question, what are some of the needs when you return to work this afternoon? What can you predict are going to be opportunities that will require a tender response as you interact with your staff?
Okay, I've just unmuted Bonnie Redmond. Now, Bonnie, I know you have another question too, but if you could answer this for Chris first, that would be great.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, welcome, Bonnie.
Thank you. My question was when you mentioned you might just take 60 seconds to get joy when you're tense or overwhelmed. Is that just remembering a joyful time, or what are you doing during that 60 seconds?
Good question. What I would do during that moment is basically I would take a really, really nice deep breath from my belly, which always is a helpful way to rest a little bit, and then I would think about one of my favorite appreciation memories. And so that might be a memory where I went for a walk with my son up and down the driveway, and we were playing and we were talking. It'd be an interaction that brought me joy. And it doesn't take very long to think about that memory, but really focus on what it feels like. So what do you feel when you remember that joy? And that right there kind of starts to shift the gears for your nervous system to help you get back into a relational mode, and then you're kind of primed for growing more joy. And what you'll discover if this is new is, at first it might take longer than 60 seconds. You might need 2 minutes. You might need 3 minutes. But as you start practicing this more and more, it'll actually take and require less and less time to get those joy circuits up and running, so to speak. So hopefully that helps you there, Bonnie.
Yes, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Good, thank you. All right, anybody else have a thought about what are some common needs that might require a tender response among your staff? Is there anything that comes to mind for people as you think about just realistically, when I walk outside my office, I start interacting with people, what are some of those needs that you're going to encounter that are actually opportunities for you to convey that you're glad to be with other people and recognize this would be a good time for a tender response, and I don't want to minimize their pain or their problem. I don't want to dismiss it, but
Okay.
listen.
We have somebody type in something, so they must not be able to speak. Sarah, if you can speak, you can raise your hand instead of typing the question, but I'll go ahead and start reading it. She said, physical and emotional overwhelm requires a tender response.
Yes.
She needs Jesus' help to discern the needs of my staff and let them rest, and to rest with them.
Yes, that's a great answer. That's a great answer.
All right, now Charlotte Lehman is here. I'm going to unmute you. Charlotte, are you there?
Yes, here I am.
Hi, Charlotte. Welcome.
Hey, great to be with you guys. Yeah, I was just thinking if someone feels hurt in the community by something, it definitely needs a tender response. And the most difficult one to have a tender response to is if they feel hurt by me.
Yes.
So then that's a challenge for me to stay relational and stay joyful, stay glad to be with them, even though they're bringing me something that they're essentially not happy about that has something to do with me or my decisions. But if I can stay tender there, it just makes a world of difference in how that interaction goes.
Yes, that's a great example. Thank you. That's a very important example right there, because the last thing we want to do is dismiss someone's reality when they're upset. And I'd say that's a very good example right there that tends to happen frequently for many of us when we're interacting with people.
One thing I've noticed too is that if I am able to really stay joyful and relational, glad to be with the person, that the rewards are great. I mean, that trust is really built in the relationship, that the person, I have never yet had that happen when I was able to stay relational, that the person afterwards didn't thank me. I mean, not that we don't necessarily come to agreement on maybe some issue that they disagree with, made some decision I made, but that they really always then say, oh, thank you so much for listening, or I feel like you've really heard me, or something like that.
Yes.
And then we actually, I feel like our bond is stronger. I mean, I don't always respond in that ideal way, and that's difficult, but at least I have enough examples of when it happened in a good way that that gives me something to shoot for. Nice.
Thank you. And how redemptive that is for people to be able to have that kind of an interaction with you. And it can be very redemptive and very healing for folks to have that kind of a response. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you, Charlotte. All right. Next I have Melinda. All right. Melinda, are you there?
I am.
Hi, Melinda. Welcome.
Hi, Chris. So in my work environment, I guess the tender response would be everybody kind of seems to exist as an individual. And so, what would be a response to those tender situations where everybody's kind of divided in that way?
Yeah, that's a good question. When people are kind of divided and maybe not on the same page, what would that look like? Yeah, and that's a good question that for many of us we do want to think through is what does this look like for you with your personal style and your personality? What are ways that you could express tender responses when you're interacting with your staff? And that might be just being a good listener. It might be validating what they're going through, even if you're the source of their upset, as Charlotte shared. You know, one of the, and sometimes, frankly, it's easier to identify what is not a tender response. And so what would not help you when you're overwhelmed, upset, feeling, you know, feeling angry with someone or hurt by someone. What helps and what doesn't help? And it really helps to be able to kind of put ourselves in other people's shoes and then start to practice this. And frankly, the good thing about what we're proposing today is you'll find there's no shortage of opportunities to start practicing this. And I find even when I don't handle things in a way that I'm pleased with, when I can recognize that, actually I start working on improving it with the next opportunity. And so this leads us to our next question is, what do you find hinders you from offering those tender responses to other people's weaknesses?
Chris, let me jump in here just a second with a comment, and that is to say, your comment is a very interesting one, Melinda, in that it sort of indicates that within Christian culture we really haven't developed a way in which to even do some of the most basic thing, which is to say, well, I can see you're sort of overwhelmed by this. Let's just stop a minute and let me pray for you to be strengthened and quieted and experience the Lord's presence right now, which would be sort of the our most standard Christian response. But it's not the way culture usually does it, because we're that almost feels like we'd be intruding into somebody else's life by doing that. So again,
even working in a Christian atmosphere.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and so part of the thing we have to look at in the short term is it may be hard to come up with a solution. In the long term, how do we want to go about changing the atmosphere even within our churches and organizations so that they overcome the things that culture has provided us with barriers, so that it does become something that we can do together as Christians. There's something sort of revolutionary about bringing joy back into the world in the church.
Yes, that's right. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you, Jim.
Very good. So, anything come to mind for you when you think about the things that hinder you from offering tender responses? And I'll put my own answer out here first. For me, one of my hindrances would be when I'm tired. So when I'm tired or I'm distracted by a project, I'm not in relational mode, and I may miss those opportunities to respond in a way that would be very mutually satisfying for me and the person that I'm interacting with. So that'd be one example that hinders me. Anybody else have a thought that comes to mind?
All right.
Yeah, for me, the thing is it's going to take time. I just, oh no, this will take time.
Yeah.
All right, I've got Jerry. I'm going to unmute you. He's got his hand up here for an answer.
All right. Jerry, welcome.
Hi, Chris. Hi, Jim. The one thing that I've kind of been learning is it's hard to be tender to other people when I'm not even tender to myself.
Yes, that's a good point. That's a good point. So when I'm not even tender with myself and my own needs, then odds are very high I'm not going to have a lot of tenderness to offer those that I'm interacting with, those that I love and serve. Good point. Yeah, there's a lot to chew on there. Thank you, Jerry.
You bet.
All right, Bonnie.
Anyone else have a thought? Bonnie?
Hi, me again. One thing I've noticed, I'm feeling new at learning this. I've just gone through Restart and one class of belonging.
Oh.
So I was just thinking my own joy capacity is so low that I'm surrounded by a lot of immature people who, and so I wind up not receiving a lot but constantly pouring out. And so when I do get the occasional person who wants to show appreciation to me or something, I have a really difficult time receiving it. I tend to minimize it or think of how they just really don't know me. And so I guess my question would be, and I'm sure I'll get more of this as I get into your stuff, but how to increase my own joy capacity other than the simple things you've already mentioned today about rest and
Yeah.
Just how to receive better.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say probably many of us can relate with that at some level as pastors we tend to be very good at giving, and that we find that very rewarding, very satisfying, and that can even meet some of the needs that we have. It's just I feel good when I'm giving. But Bonnie, one of the thoughts that I want to encourage for all of us is, again, highlighting, and you mentioned this, but highlighting that need for rest. What tends to happen when we're not rested, when we're fatigued, it will be very hard to grow new joy. And so I would say we want to, how can I rest more is one of those questions I want to write on my whiteboard today. How can I rest more? Which, the beautiful thing about rest is joy comes out of rest, and joy always should lead to rest. And so in the kind of environment where we're doing a lot of giving, I want to actually start looking at, am I working within my own capacity, and am I receiving enough and giving? And frankly, that's going to take some prayerful reflection as you start to look at those dynamics. And but the rewarding thing about pursuing some answers to that question is that you'll find that it's actually going to preserve your ministry, and it's going to preserve those relationships. But we tend to have even some fears that run beneath the surface that tend to rob us from being able to grow our joy and balancing the whole giving and the receiving out a little bit. So yeah, that's a really good question there.
To me, the real simple, again, way to start with this is that when we're having trouble receiving, and to just think of a real quick prayer, Lord, help me receive this, and then see what happens would be a good way to intervene. And if it's like me, I'll remember to do that after I get back into my office or someplace like that. Then, when it's already seems like it's too late, then I pray, oh, Lord, help me to receive that. But the funny thing about people is they have memories. So you can actually go back to somebody, which I discovered some time ago, and that say, yesterday when you tried to give me whatever it was, I didn't receive it very well. And then I went back to my office and I said, Lord, help me receive that. And here's what came to me, and let me share that with you now by way of appreciation. And that actually got me out of a lot of trouble that way. Asking God later, then going back and telling the person the story of what had happened when I'd asked God to help me receive it. Actually, the gap between how long it took me to want to receive something and when it actually happened kept getting smaller and smaller, till soon I could remember to even ask God for help right when it was happening. So I think we can all benefit by learning to go talk to God about what's causing us a problem, and then go back and share with others what happened when we had that little conversation.
And I'm guessing we'll be pleasantly surprised by the results.
All right, I've got a couple more people that wanted to get in on this one before you move on. First one was typing in. Sarah typed in that fear is a hindrance of giving a tender response.
Yes.
That's definitely true. And then I have Charlotte and then Daniel that I'm going to unmute. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute Charlotte first. There you go. Good. Charlotte?
Okay. Yeah, here I am. Can you hear me?
Yes. Welcome.
Hello? Okay, sorry. Yes, I was just going to say, I think when I feel defensive, that's definitely something that hinders me from having a tender response. And maybe afraid of whatever this other person's weakness means for my workload.
Yes.
So if that means, oh, now I'm going to have to carry that because you haven't gotten it done, or that kind of a thing, which generally means that I'm forgetting that this is God's church and not mine.
Yeah. Yep.
And that God is ultimately the one responsible for the outcomes, not for me.
Yes.
And when I'm in a non-relational kind of mode, even mildly, like I'm not feeling outwardly hostile or anything, but I'm just very task-oriented. And that's where I also find there's a real weakness in like email communication. I do so much by email, but if you get a note that actually has a fair amount of emotional content about, someone's not doing very well or something, it's easier by email to kind of just dismiss it and rather than think, I wonder if there's more to that story there, or what is that person feeling? And so even just the mode of communication, I think, sometimes can make it easier to not have as tender a response as one would have if you were having a face-to-face communication.
Good point.
Even on the phone. So anyway, that's all I want to say.
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good point. Thank you. Okay, I think Daniel had something.
Yes. Hi, Chris. How are you?
Hi,
everyone.
Good.
Good. Hey, I was just going to say that was a really good point by Jerry, and I was just going to kind of elaborate on that because I feel the exact same way. It's like when I feel like I'm not liking myself, and then when I see somebody else doing something that I do wrong or something that bugs me about myself, and I see somebody else doing it, then I really want to be harsh on that person.
Yes. Yeah. Good point. Good point. Thank you. So it's clear we're getting some good discussion going here as we start to think about what hinders us, and a few other questions which I'm running out of time, but I still want to put them out there for you all to start thinking about. Would be, are your weaknesses expressed in such a way that you're able to receive tender responses? And we've kind of touched on this a little bit already, of feeling like as leaders we have to be all together and strong, and we're not really allowed to let people know that our armor has some weaknesses. Or how can we proactively set that example for what we're learning today? You're going to have the opportunity, starting in 5 minutes to start interacting with people, and how can we actually start applying this? And so I'm hoping here that we're giving you some food for thought as you start to apply this to your own life, your own ministry. And I would like I want to talk about a resource today that I think is going to help you propagate joy, grow joy, share joy in your life, in your ministry, with your staff, with your congregation. And one of the easiest tools that I want to make available to all of you today is what we call 4+ stories. And this is actually another one of the 19 skills that we train through Thrive and the Thriving Recover Your Life program. And what it is it's an easy way to share joy by telling 2 3-minute stories. And we're going to look at those stories briefly. And one of the ways you can actually not only grow joy but pass on some of these relational skills to other people would be telling these stories of times where you acted like the person God created you to be, or you failed to act like that person, and what it might have looked like if you had. We call that acting like myself stories. And these are going to be very genuine, authentic stories. Or other times you can share with people how you were able to return to joy from a negative emotion and what that looks like. And return to joy is another one of these relational skills that we train. And then we can share Emmanuel stories, which means what happened when I perceived that God was with me in a new place. And what you'll find with these stories is, 1, they're very practical. 2, they're easy to pull off. It just takes a little bit of training and some practice to start being able to do this. And one of the ways you start is actually using these 4+ story sheets to write out your stories and then start telling these stories. And I'll be honest with you, I tell these stories when I'm at the airport. I tell these stories when I'm interacting with people at the grocery store. I tell them with my staff, the people that I interact with. And you'll notice it's an easy way to start passing on that joy. And after this joy stream, I'm going to make these sheets that you can download, a PDF, available on the Pastor's Weekly webpage of the Thrive website. So in just a few minutes, we'll have that up there for you. You can download it, print it off, and put these things to use and watch what happens. And you'll notice there's some important points to try to convey through your stories, like using enough words and include feeling words. What does joy feel like, and how would you describe that when you're telling your story? And you're involved in your story, obviously. We want to really tell a story from our point of view. And you want to show the joy on your face when you're telling a joy story. You know, what does joy look like for you? What does it sound like? And what's happening in your body? And these are some of these require a bit of a learning curve because we're just not used to doing this. But as far as our brain is concerned, this is one of the most practical ways you can really pull off a good synchronized story that's going to start training your listeners in some of these skills. And how is it like you to act when you feel joyful? You talk about the joy, you stay relational during the joy. We want to keep our stories concise. I prefer about a 2-3 minute story. If we get into a 10-15 minute story, we've kind of lost the training value of that particular story. And again, your body and your face is the canvas for these stories. And keep eye contact, stay relational. And I want to invite everyone here. I'm excited about our next week Joy Streams because it's Valentine's Day next Thursday. So Jen and I are actually going to talk about how to start a joy revival in your marriage. And I want to invite you all to bring your spouse to this Joy Stream. We're going to be very practical about how to boost the joy levels in your marriage. We're going to talk about some exercises and just some fun things you can do. And we're going to have Dr. Jim Wilder back that following Thursday on the 21st. And you're going to have an opportunity to vote on what you want Jim to talk about here in just a moment. Then we're going to have David Tackle with us on March 7th to talk about the trouble with obedience. And David is one of the developers of the forming module. So you're not going to want to miss these opportunities to learn more. All right. With our closing time here, we're going to have a chance to vote on what would you like to hear from Jim in 2 weeks. Would you like to vote on what you should know about joy before your children grow up? Or would you like to hear about a 3-minute solution so you can come home to a smile each night? All right. So, Denny, I'm going to let you take a moment. And
yep, I've launched the poll. It
vote.
should be on your screen. All you have to do is use your mouse to make your selection. And if it's not there and you want to send it to me, just send it to the chat area or the questions panel. Looks like currently we're at about 60% on the 3-minute solution.
3-minute solution. Very good. All right. Well, while people vote, I'm just going to close with a little mention on some resources here. I just want to highlight again, if you want to learn more about what you're hearing here, one of the most practical resources are what we call the Jesus in Mind teachings by Jim. And these are just full of wonderful audio teachings that include a lot of this material, both in Scripture as well as neuroscience and or brain science. It talks more about a lot of the life model topics. And Jim mentioned that we have a book on the horizon called Joy Starts Here. We'll be talking about that more in coming Joy Streams. And you can learn more about who we are at the Life Model website. And if you want to really start proactively growing joy, then the Thrive Training is a valuable resource. We have 2 events coming up this year. These are 5-day trainings. We are very serious about equipping you with these joy-based skills. So May 27th through the 31st in Alberta, Canada, in St. Albert, as well as Peoria, Illinois, in July 15th through the 19th. There's some required preparation because when you come to Thrive, it's all hands-on training. We don't actually offer teaching there. So you'll get all the prep work before you come to Thrive. Jen and I lead weekend marriage retreats that are really easy ways of growing joy for couples, as well as available skill guides. And Ed Corey and his team there have developed what we call the Thriving Recover Your Life, which is something you've heard about from people today with restarting and belonging. And Thriving is an excellent way to start growing some community joy, and churches and groups are having a lot of success running these modules. And Ed has his own joy streams that I'd highly recommend you take a look at as well. And boy, I think I'm out of time here. So Denny, what's the results from our
65% for the what was it called? The 3-minute solution, 65%.
Okay, great. So 3-minute solution, Jim, that's what we're going to be talking about in 2 weeks.
All right. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, the Lord bless all of you. I thank you for being here today. I look forward to next week. We'll talk about starting a joy revival in our marriages. And may the Lord bless you today. Thank you very much.
All right. Bye-bye.